I just realized I didn't script how we wanted to start this video. Hey guys, today we're going to actually revisit a topic that we've talked about in the past. We're going to talk about our ACF line of charging handles. Let's get into it. So why are we covering ACF again? We've already had a few videos on ACF on this channel. In fact, I think just the general overview of it was one of the very first videos I ever did on this channel. Well, a couple reasons. First of all, we have this big overhead projection here. And instead of it being a separate video, we're going to also be able to include information about ACF L, which I have a couple models hanging up here. And also, just to be totally honest with you guys, I have a lot more time with ACF. I can give you guys a little bit more information about my firsthand experience with it, not just what we recommend and the information we put out as a manufacturer, but also it gives me the opportunity to tell you guys about my experience shooting ACF or shooting with ACF over the last 3 years. Because one of the things that's pretty incredible is that since I made that first video, suppressors are extremely easy to get your hands on these days. The tax stamp on them is free, and the wait times still seem to be extremely low, contrary to what everybody kind of thought was going to happen when tax stamps became free and not $200. So still have to go through the NFA process, but there is an integral relationship between suppressors and the charging handle, specifically the ACF. And we'll get into that as we talk about some other platforms as well, because it's not just on DI guns, it's also on piston guns, and we'll explain why here in a second. But let me just start by just grabbing, this is a great option because I don't have any optics on this gun right now, which makes it pretty easy for me to show it to you guys in the top-down view. So one of the very first things that you may notice about ACF is that it's rearward sweeping versus forward-facing on the tongues, right, or the flanges that you would grab to actuate it. And that seems like it would be an issue when it comes to running the charging handle, maybe at first glance. I know it was actually my biggest concern, and I originally was pretty skeptical about the ACF until, if you look at this top-down view, one of the very first things you notice is that as I take my hand like I would go to run a charging handle, I actually am already creating, if I can overlay it here, I'm creating the exact shape that the ACF actually makes with my thumb here, turning concave inward. So it actually fits the hand extremely well. I know that was my biggest concern when I first started running ACF, as I thought that maybe I wouldn't be able to get as much grip on it, but you don't have to have a giant hook in order to get good purchase and leverage on ACF. It's actually shaped exactly like your hand is meant to run and do this motion here. So that's one of the biggest deals about ACF, and in the ways that I actually had a lot of my skepticism or maybe some of my preconceived notions challenged was that the shape of it actually lends itself quite well to being ran as a charging handle without all the drawbacks of it being a hook, right? So if it's shaped like a hook, it's going to act like a hook. So if it's got a hook to it, then it's actually going to get impeded on by like gear or any type of like webbing, like your sling that you might have. So something that actually rolls pretty easily off the side instead of it being this deliberate motion. If it's a indeliberate motion, you're just increasing your chances of it just being completely disregarded by the ACF. So that leads me into another point. Let me go grab a Glock here real quick. So I got a Glock here, or Lone Wolf Glock clone, not a real Glock, but it's a Gen 3 Glock. So Glocks have a safety on the trigger, which is this little latch in here. So if I'm not actuating the latch, if I just grab it by the sides, actually, as you can see I'm doing here, so I can't actually actuate this trigger no matter how hard I push without disengaging that little safety mechanism, right? So we have something that's identical to that on the ACF, and that is these little latches here. So these latches, I can't actually actuate this charging handle, or I could even try to grab it with my whole body, and without disengaging those latches, it's not gonna come loose. It has to have those latches just disengaged. So from both a ergonomic standpoint and a inadvertently pulling your gun out of battery standpoint, the ACF actually addresses a lot of those concerns in a really low profile way. Now, we talked about it a lot in our original ACF video. We compared it a lot to the TDP spec charging handle, and frankly, this is a really good charging handle. It's probably one of our favorite designs when it comes to like gun parts that exist out there. It's no wider than it needs to be, right? So you're going to induce that motion perfectly rearward, right? There's no offset or transitional force being introduced when you have to grab it and you have to pull it straight back. And while we're on the subject of low profile, I did want to show you guys, this is my 300 blackout. It's a 9-inch 300 blackout from PWS. It's their Mark 109. And you know, with it being a 300 blackout, I wanted to keep it extremely small. And one of the reasons, in addition to the suppressed performance of it, that I selected the ACF on not just this, but all my carbines, is it's no wider than it needs to be. I actually really like the form factor of it. I like that it's no wider than my brass deflector or my forward assist in the instance of the standard model. It's still extremely slimline. We're gonna get into suppressor performance here in a second when I bring this gun back. But while we're talking about width, we do offer a variant of ACF. So this is ACF L, or L4 LPVO. So it is a wider variant of the ACF. And I really like it because it's great for if you have a scope that sits extremely low, you know, like, I shouldn't say extremely low, the standard scope height, right? So this is a Night Force 2.5 to 20 on a Unity Recce mount, which is not in the 226 height of most Unity mounts. This one's actually 154. It's a standard optic height. Because of that, and because I have, you know, this little lens cover to keep my lens safe, there's not a massive amount of room around the charging handle, so I just run a deliberately wider charging handle. That's the only reason for it. The only thing that's different about ACF L is it's slightly wider. So all the benefits with it being a unibody design and it taking, you know, design cues from the TDP charging handle, all that exists. It's just slightly wider, and it works great for, you know, these larger scopes. LPVOs oftentimes will actually have an even bigger optical side of the, you know, the optic system, and so the fact that they're, you know, oftentimes even bigger, maybe even about the size of this lens cover here, means that you don't have a lot of room, especially if you're running a standard optic height. So ACFL just gives you a little bit of purchase outwards in order to run your charging handle. So that's it on this setup. On this this Hodge 11.5 here, I have ACFL as well, but for another reason. So I am using a Unity flip to center magnifier. This is their 4X, their whole integrated system. It's a great magnifier, really like it, and I like having this magnifier on this gun. The only downside is that most of the time I'm going to be using the red dot, so I'm going to be using it unmagnified. And the flip to center, because it's very ingeniously designed, it basically gets sunk right up, butted against the top of the upper receiver. And so because of that, what that means is that I also have you know, not a lot of room here in the rear where the charging handle would be. And so this is the other use case in which I choose to run an ACFL. So those are my two guns that have ACFLs, and a couple of the reasons why. Another great thing to consider is that if you're using this in like an ARPK type of role, if you're running big, like beefy, leathery gloves and you just need a bigger charging handle, but you don't want something that snags or has a separate latching mechanism that's going to potentially break on you, the ACFL is also a great option. So that's something I wanted to talk about with the unibody design. So the unibody design, as we've hit on in the past, it transfers all of the energy throughout the entirety of the charging handle, and these latches actually recede inside of that unibody design. So because of that, when I'm actually pulling on this, the thing that's actually getting pulled on after that latch disengages is the top and bottom portions where my hands interface with this, and that's transferring all that energy throughout the body of the unibody design. So that is what makes the ACF so strong. But we have seen failures in which guys are, you know, either they're running the charging handle normally, you know, maybe it has some life on that charging handle, and or they were mortaring it, right? And they're inducing a lot of pressure onto the tabs as they were going to mortar the gun, and they sheared off one of those latches. So again, I'm not going to show you guys which one because we're not trying to diss on any one specific brand here. It can happen to any brand that has the separate latches, but for those reasons, we choose not to do it, right? And like we like to say, when it comes to the TDP spec, the way the AR-15 was originally designed, any deviation from that has to have a reason, and we just haven't really found any reason to deviate from the unibody design beyond what we already did with the ACF. So that's the ACF as far as some of the aspects of the ergonomics of it. I did want to also touch on, when we're talking about compatibility, we do have, which is what I'm holding right now and using as an example, we do have an MCX variant of this. This was in a Rattler, but it'll also work in a Spear LT. It'll work in a Virtus. I don't know if it'll work on the Legacy ones. You should email in if you're potentially purchasing for Legacy, but I do know, at least for a matter of fact, that it works with the Rattler, because that's what this was in. It also works in the Spear LT and the Virtus. So we have a variant for the MCX guys as well. The only thing that's different about the MCX variant and the standard variant, let me see if I can pull one out here. So this is our standard model of ACF. The only thing that's different about it on the MCX is, as you can see from the top side, there are these little phalanges that come down and complete more of a seal around the receiver versus the MCX variant that just has to be flat. All that just has to do with the way the MCX's receiver is designed. So that's the only thing that's different. So while we're showing you this profile, one of the things I wanted to make sure you guys were aware of, and we can even demonstrate it more if I throw this back in the upper receiver, is we get a actually oversized fitment around the upper receiver on the top side. So going above and beyond even what the PRI did with their gas buster, we have not just flush, but we actually have a taller fence that goes all the way around the upper receiver group, and on the bottom side actually starts to seal around the tube portion where your bolt carrier group would actually, you know, actuate inside of, right? So we can see in this portion of this receiver here, we're looking at it backwards with obviously no lower receiver on this. This is the bolt carrier group, and this is the ACF, and it's actually protruding up past the upper receiver's top Picatinny section and down into the area of the tube where the bolt carrier group actually rides. So because of this, this is an incredibly tight seal that prevents gas from getting back into the face of the shooter. Now, there are no charging handles out there that are immune to the laws of physics. Gas has to go somewhere. It's just a fact. We can't make gas disappear. And so by making it more difficult for it to actually leave around this area, it's going to choose the path of least resistance, and it's going to go elsewhere, whether that's outside your ejection port or maybe through the drainage tube of your buffer tube. It's actually going to be directed away from the shooter's face, what little leaks out around the receiver group, and then because it's such a tight seal, it's just going to exit out of other holes that are going to naturally exist within, you know, the mechanics of your AR-15. So that is not just the case on direct impingement guns. When I say direct impingement, what do I mean by that? Most AR-15s, I feel like most people know this, but I'm still going to cover it anyway. Most people know that when your AR-15 cycles, the bullet is going to, you know, the primer gets ignited, the bullet's going to start traveling down the length of your barrel. Once it gets past your gas block, which is about here on this Hodge 12.5, some of that gas is going to get recycled back into the upper receiver group, and it's going to impinge, right? Direct impingement. It's going to impinge on this bolt carrier group and make it cycle, right? So it just goes in that little gas key there, so it makes it cycle. So gas does go into your upper receiver group in order to cycle the weapon, but that's not the only place where gas actually gets put back into the upper receiver. Most people think that's the case. That's totally, you know, understandable why people would think that, but there is still gas that comes back into the upper receiver on pistons as well. So bringing back in, you know, one of my PWSs, it's not just on PWSs. I've had 416s and MCXs. There's a reason we have an ACF for the MCX as well, is that because the other way gas gets into your upper receiver group during the cycling of the operation of the weapon is once that bolt, right, the rotating bolt unlocks and starts to cycle, gas is going to start exiting from your chamber as well. So it's not just from the direct impingement system of a DI AR-15, it also is going to be just naturally coming from the chamber as well, which is why even on my piston guns, right, like my 416 that you guys have seen, and all my PWSs, I still run the ACF, right? So it's not just for the sake of benefiting DI guns. I also get a lot of benefit out of it on the piston guns. I'll show you guys some B-roll here of some amazing gas busting happening, actually, I think, with this gun. So. Are you going to put a So I pulled every single AR-15 off the rack. I pulled one out of a bag, out of my tactical theology bag. And I just wanted to lay them all out here, and I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about, kind of what I do for a living, and in this last portion give you my own personal thoughts. So these aren't the opinions, positions of Forward Controls Design. This is just Austin. Forward Controls isn't the only company I make media for, which I think people have kind of figured out by now. That wasn't as confusing for people as I thought it might have been, but Forward Controls isn't the only company I service and do media and marketing for. But what I will say is that despite the fact that I can have my pick of parts on every single gun for every single gun company that I make media for, I still use ACF as my charging handle of choice. And the reasons for that, just on a personal level, is really, one, the rigidity and the performance of it and the durability. I take a lot of these guns to different classes, and I just really can't afford to have any parts that aren't reliable if they're integral to the cycling and the operation of these weapons platforms. And I shoot almost 100% suppressed. So it's pretty rare that I'm shooting unsuppressed. I love suppressors. I think we live in a modern society where you should be shooting suppressed whenever you can. And I love the gas buster benefits of the ACF. And finally, like I said, I love that it's no bigger than it needs to be. So with it being no bigger than it needs to be, I don't have these giant overhanging protruding parts. I'm pretty picky about any sort of like masses hanging off of my gun if I don't have to. So I really like the size and the performance ratio that I get out of all of my my ARs, even on little things like the again, I keep going back to this one because I think it's such a great example. Like my 9-inch 300 Blackout, even though I know that there are charging handles that exist that are designed for like PDW applications, there are different custom ones that were made for like the Q Honey Badger, I still am going to use the ACF because of that gas buster principle of it, and it's really no bigger than it needs to be. It still is incredibly small. Even if the forward assist didn't exist on here, it would be a very low profile. Actually, this is a great chance to show you. Even on like this PWS Mark 111 Pro that doesn't have a forward assist, it just has the brass deflector. I like the ACF because it maintains that low profile aspect of it, and again, like I showed you, it fits my human hand just perfectly, and I really have no complaints as far as the difficulty of running it when I'm actually cycling the bolt. So that's just a little bit of personal background. So what I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbines here right in front of me. They're all my personal guns that I shoot constantly, and I can put any parts on these that I want, especially if I'm servicing different gun companies or different manufacturers, and I still choose to run ACF because it works for me. I really do think it is probably one of the best products that Forward Controls Designs makes. I know that might seem a little cheap because this video is going to live on the Forward Controls Design YouTube, so obviously I'm going to say good things about it, but in all sincerity, I really do enjoy the ACF as a product, and I just want to include this portion at the end because it's my genuine opinion, and I'm in a position where I can articulate that and show that it's not just marketing material I was contracted to make. It is my own personal charging handle of choice. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. If you ever want to see any of the progressions of how we've kind of landed on this this final amalgamation of all the information about the ACF, we do have some other videos on our channel about them, but this is going to be the most in-depth where you're going to see actually like real close-up shots of it, as well as some B-roll footage of the gas buster principles of it. So hope you guys had a great time watching this video. Train smart. Have a good day.